The dim glow of the archival console flickered across Lena's face as she hunched over the interface in the bowels of the station. The air hummed with the low thrum of life support systems, a constant reminder that this outpost orbited a nameless rock far from any sun's warmth. Lena, ever the meticulous archivist with her sharp eyes and unyielding curiosity, traced her finger along the holographic display. "There it is," she muttered, her voice barely cutting through the quiet. "The vote of 2147. The one that sealed our fate." Beside her, Jax leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, his broad frame casting a shadow that swallowed half the console's light. He was the mechanic, built like the engines he repaired, solid, reliable, with a grin that hid his impatience for anything not bolted down. "Fate? Come on, Lena. It's just old data. Why drag me down here for this ghost hunt?" She shot him a glance, her lips quirking in that way that meant she was about to school him. "Because it's not just data. It's the reason we're scraping by on this tin can light years from home. The Galactic Concordance banished Earth, our Earth, after that vote. Colonies like ours? Were the scraps they forgot." Jax pushed off the wall, peering at the scrolling text. Words like resource inequity and existential threat jumped out, dry as station rations. He scratched his stubbled jaw. "Banished. Sounds dramatic. What, did we lose a popularity contest with the stars?" Lena's fingers danced over the controls, pulling up a grainy recording. A chamber filled with alien delegates, their forms a riot of bioluminescence and chitin, debating in a babble of translated tongues. At the center, human envoys stood defiant, but the tide turned on a single motion. "It was more than that," she said, her voice steady but edged with the weight of inherited grudge. "Earth's expansion choked the outer rims. Overpopulation, mining wars, we pushed too hard. They voted to isolate us, cut off trade, tech, everything. Left us to wither." The recording crackled, a delegate's voice booming. "Humanity's hubris endangers the accord. Exile is mercy." Jax snorted, but his eyes narrowed. "Mercy? Look at us now. A crew of 20, nursing failing hydroponics on a station that's one solar flare from blackout." A soft chime interrupted, the console alerting to an incoming transmission. Lena frowned, swiping it open. Not the routine supply ping they expected. Instead, an encrypted burst from the core worlds, marked urgent. "Jax, look at this. It's addressed to the archives. Specifically the vote files." He straightened, the easy banter gone. "Coincidence? Nothing's coincidence out here." She decrypted it with practiced ease, her caution a shield honed by years of isolation. The message unfolded, a query not from the concordance but a rogue signal. Someone, or something, was probing the vote's sealed records. And it promised coordinates in return. Coordinates to untapped resources hidden from the ban. Jax's hand hovered near the emergency shutdown. Could be a trap. Pirates, spies, who knows? Lena hesitated, the console's glow reflecting the spark in her eyes. Brave didn't mean reckless, but curiosity was her vice. Or it could be a way out. For all of us. She hit accept, the data stream igniting a new file in the archives. Unbeknownst to them, that single choice cracked open a vault long sealed, stirring shadows that had slumbered since the banishment. The station's lights dimmed fractionally as power rerouted to process the influx. In the observation deck above, Mira watched the stars wheel by, her wiry frame tense from another failed repair shift. The pilot, quick-witted and always 3 steps ahead, she sensed the shift in the air before the alarms whispered it. "Something's coming," she said to the empty room, gripping the console. Down below, the archives stirred with ghosts of a world lost, and the crew's fragile peace teetered on the edge. Lyra's fingers danced across the console, pulling up the archived footage from the Galactic Council's session. The chamber materialized on the hollow screen, a vast dome of iridescent alloy where representatives from 100 worlds sat in tiered rings. At the center, the human delegate, Earth's last voice before the vote, stood rigid, her face a mask of controlled fury. Lyra leaned closer, the dim glow of the screen casting shadows across her narrow quarters aboard the archival station. "Playback at triple speed," she muttered to the AI, skipping through the preliminaries. The arguments blurred, the Krell accusing humans of reckless expansion, the Vexery citing environmental scars on colony worlds, the neutral arbiter droning about precedents. Then, the vote tallied, 98-2 Earth isolated, its ships grounded, its people branded a hazard. Lyra paused the feed, zooming in on the human's eyes, wide with disbelief. What had driven them to this? She tapped her comm, summoning Jax from engineering. He arrived with his usual slouch, toolkit slung over one shoulder, grease smudged on his cheek like war paint. You find something juicy in the old ghosts? Jax asked, eyeing the frozen image. He was the only other human on the station, a mechanic with a knack for coaxing life from failing systems, his optimism a stubborn counter to the isolation that still lingered in their blood. Not ghosts, Lyra said, swiping the hollow to life again. Just the moment it all shattered. But look here, the metadata's glitched. Someone tampered with the sublayers. She pointed to a flickering timestamp, out of sync by milliseconds. Jax whistled low, pulling up his own scanner. As they worked side by side, the station's hum deepened, a subtle vibration Lyra hadn't noticed before. Alarms stayed silent, but unease prickled her skin. Down in the lower decks, the real trouble brewed unseen. A power conduit, frayed from years of neglect, sparked against the hull. The archival station orbited a nameless gas giant, its storms raging below like a living threat. If the surge hit the core archives, the data, centuries of galactic history, could cascade into oblivion. Jax's scanner beeped urgently. Lyra, we've got a breach in Sector 7. Not just a glitch, it's cascading. She straightened, heart quickening. The vote's archives were their charge, a fragile testament to Earth's banishment. Losing them now would erase more than records. It would bury the why of their exile, leaving humans like them adrift in a galaxy that had already turned its back. Suit up, she said, grabbing her harness. We fix this before it wakes the whole station. They moved fast through the corridors, the air growing thick with ozone. Jax led, his steps sure despite the dim emergency lights flickering on. Remember that sim we ran last cycle? The one where the hull breach floods the lower bays? He said, voice steady but edged. Lyra nodded, clipping her mag boots to the deck. Yeah, and you jury-rigged the seals with conduit tape. Worked in the sim, not so sure about reality. A distant groan echoed from the bulkheads, the station protesting the strain. They reached the access hatch to Sector 7, the door hissing open to reveal sparks arcing across exposed wiring. The gas giant's storms visible through a viewport swirled with malevolent fury, as if mocking their fragile outpost. Jax dove in first, wrench in hand, while Lyra monitored the flows from the panel outside. Divert power from non-essentials, he called over the comm, his voice cutting through static. She routed energy from the wrecked dome, lights dimming station-wide. A jolt rocked the floor, another surge. Alarms finally wailed, red strobes painting their faces in bloody hues. It's feeding back, Lyra shouted. If we don't isolate it, the whole archive core goes dark. Sweat beaded on Jax's brow as he pried at a jammed relay. The sparks leaped closer, singeing his glove. Lyra's mind raced, the vote footage still open on her pad, a reminder of how one failure could doom a world. She yanked a spare cable from her pack, improvising a bypass. Try this, loop it through the auxiliary line. He connected it with a grunt, the arc flaring bright before dying to a sputter. The vibration eased, the alarms cycling down to a wary beep. They slumped against the bulkhead, breathing hard, the viewport storm a calmer whirl now. But as Lyra checked the logs, a new anomaly blinked. The glitch in the vote's metadata had deepened, pulling in files from adjacent sessions. Whatever had caused the banishment wasn't just history, it was unraveling, thread by thread, right here in their hands. Ilara's fingers hovered over the console, the holographic display flickering like a hesitant flame in the dim archive chamber. The air hummed with the low whine of ancient servers, pulling data from the forbidden sector. She'd bypassed the outer locks hours ago, but this inner vault, sealed since the vote, felt alive, watchful. Beside her, Jax leaned against a support strut, his broad shoulders tense under the jumpsuit scarred from a dozen salvage runs. You sure about this? He muttered, voice low, eyes scanning the shadows. One wrong code and the whole station wakes up. She didn't look up, her focus sharpening on the stream of encrypted files. Brave as ever, that's what they called her back on the outpost. Ilara Voss, the archivist who dove into history's black holes without a tether. But caution nodded her now, a quiet voice reminding her of the stakes. The vote had scattered humanity across the void, branding Earth a pariah world, its records purged from every official archive. Yet whispers persisted, hidden backups, echoes of the old cradle that could rewrite alliances. If they found it, the rival fleets circling this nebula might finally see humans not as pests, but as kin worth allying with. The console beeped, a soft chime cutting through the hum. Ilara's heart quickened. Got it? At the center, the human envoy, Dr. Lena Thorne, her face etched with defiance, stood alone against the tide. This isn't exile, Thorne's recorded voice crackled, steady but edged with steel. It's erasure. Earth's ingenuity built the warp drives you all rely on. Banishing us doesn't delete that legacy. Jax pushed off the wall, peering closer. His wit was his armor, usually quick jabs to lighten the load, but now his jaw tightened. Look at the votes rolling in. Kragari first, then the Vex. They didn't even debate it. He was the cautious one, the engineer who'd patched their shuttle 100 times over, always calculating risks like fuel margins or hull integrity. This run was his idea, born from a barroom bet on a fringe station, but doubt shadowed his eyes. The challenge wasn't just the archives, it was what lay beyond. Rival scavengers from the Orion Compact had been sniffing around these ruins for weeks, their drones lighting up sensors like fireflies in the dark. One sighting and they'd swarm. Ilara scrolled deeper, the files unfolding like forgotten scrolls. Schematics emerged, Earth's fusion cores, the neural nets that powered early AI mediators. But then, a snag, the decrypt hit a wall, red alerts pulsing. Firewall's adaptive, she whispered, sweat beading on her brow. Her fingers flew, rerouting through a backdoor protocol she jury-rigged from pre-vote tech manuals. It held for a breath, then buckled. Alarms blared, faint but rising, echoing through the vents. Jax grabbed her arm. Time to bail. That's not a warning, it's a summons. He yanked a portable drive from his belt, slotting it in to siphon what they could. Data flowed in fits, incomplete but vital. Coordinates to a hidden Earth relay, buried in asteroid belts. Enough to prove the old world's hand in galactic peace, maybe sway the Compact's blockade. They bolted for the access hatch, the chamber's lights snapping on behind them, harsh and unforgiving. Footsteps, metallic, clanking, reverberated from the corridor ahead. Not station security, those were gone with the purge. Scavengers. Ilara's mind raced, piecing together a plan. The relay cords burned in her memory. If they made it back to the shuttle, they could transmit a fragment by time. But Jack stumbled, cursing as a loose panel tripped him. She hauled him up, their breaths sinking in the sprint. The archives weren't just data. They were a trap, springing now with the weight of centuries. Blaster fire scorched the wall beside them, the rival team's shouts in guttural Orion dialect. Jax fired back, his shot wild but buying seconds. Vent shaft, left, he barked, pointing to a grate half hidden in the gloom. Ilara nodded, prying it open with a tool from her kit. They tumbled in, the narrow crawlspace swallowing them whole. Dust choked the air, but it muffled their escape, the rivals' pursuit fading to frustrated echoes. Crawling side by side, Ilara felt the drive's weight in her pocket, a tangible piece of the past. The vote had banished Earth, but its ghost lingered, demanding reckoning. As they neared the outer hull, a new alert pinged her comm. Shuttle integrity compromised, drones had found it. Jax met her gaze in the faint glow of his headlamp. We adapt or we die out here. Your call. She swallowed, the grit of determination settling in. We steal theirs. Ilara's fingers danced over the holographic interface, pulling up the fragmented logs from the 47th cycle. The archive chamber hummed softly, its walls lined with crystalline data spires that pulsed like veins under synth skin. She leaned back in her chair, the faint scent of ozone clinging to the air from the overworked projectors. Beside her, Crix, the wiry Vexery analyst, hunched over his own console, his multifaceted eyes flickering as he cross-referenced timelines. See this? Crix said, his voice a rapid chirp that grated against the quiet. He jabbed a claw at a glowing thread in the projection. The vote wasn't just a tally. There were subroutines, hidden ones. Someone buried the human delegation's counterproposal deep in the auxiliary feeds. Elara nodded, her jaw tight. She'd always suspected the official records painted too clean a picture. Earth, banished in a single session of the Galactic Concord, labeled a disruptive anomaly for its endless wars and resource grabs. But the archives whispered otherwise if you knew where to listen. She swiped through the data, her brave streak pushing her past the fatigue that had settled in her bones after 3 sleepless shifts. The chamber door hissed open, admitting Lyra, the cautious Trellian overseer with her iridescent scales shimmering under the low lights. She carried a steaming vial of nutrient slurry, her movements deliberate, as if every step weighed the risk of discovery. You're both still at it? The audit team's due in 4 cycles. If they find us dredging restricted files, we'll be fine, Elara cut in, though doubt flickered in her chest. Lyra had a point, the Concord didn't take kindly to revisiting old exiles. But Elara's grit wouldn't let her stop. Not when the pieces were starting to fit. Look at this counter-proposal. Humans weren't just defending themselves, they were offering a tech exchange. Fusion drives that could stabilize entire sectors. Why suppress it? Crix's eyes widened, reflecting the hologram's blue glow. Because it worked too well. Simulate it. He initiated the run, and the chamber filled with a web of projected trajectories, human-designed engines weaving through asteroid fields, evading blockades that had doomed lesser fleets. The simulation stuttered, then bloomed into a flawless evasion pattern. Elara felt a thrill ripple through her, human ingenuity raw and unpolished, turning desperation into dominance. But Lyra crossed her arms, her tail flicking unease. Admiration's dangerous. The vote happened because they scared everyone. Remember the prelude logs? Earth's envoys laughed off the sanctions, then reverse-engineered our shields in a single negotiation cycle. She set the vial down with a soft clink, the sound echoing like a warning. We're not here to rewrite history. Just catalog it. Elara shot her a wry smile, witty even under pressure. Cataloging's what got us this far. Without questions, it's just dust. She pulled up the next layer. Encrypted comms from the human side, time-stamped hours before the gavel fell. Static-laced voices argued in clipped tones. Something about a ghost protocol, a backup plan buried in their ship's cores. Crix leaned in, his caution melting into curiosity. Decode it. Low yield, just peek. The decryption crawled, lines of code unraveling like frayed ropes. Then, a fragment emerged, coordinates not to Earth but to a rogue outpost in the Veil Nebula. A hidden fleet? Elara's pulse quickened. If true, the banishment hadn't ended humanity, it had scattered them, seeds in the void waiting to sprout. Alarms trilled faintly from the outer corridors, the audit patrol earlier than expected. Lyra's scales darkened. Shut it down. Now. Elara hesitated, fingers hovering. The risk was real, expulsion from the archives or worse, reassignment to penal data sifting. But the image burned in her mind, a lone human vessel slipping through the stars, defiant. She slammed the console, the hologram winking out. Not yet. We move this to the sublevel. Crix grabbed the portable core. As they scrambled, stuffing data slivers into hidden pouches, the chamber's lights dimmed in protocol lockdown. Outside, footsteps echoed, methodical and closing. Elara glanced at her companions, camaraderie forging steel in the moment. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, haunted by Earth's ghost but armed with its secrets. Lyra's fingers trembled as she traced the holographic edge of the archive terminal, the blue glow casting sharp shadows across her face. The chamber hummed with the low thrum of ancient servers, buried deep in the core of New Horizon Station, where the galaxy's forgotten decisions echoed like ghosts. She'd come here alone, or so she thought, driven by the fragmented data she'd scavenged from the outer decks, whispers of that old vote, the one that had exiled Earth 4 centuries ago. But now, as the terminal flickered to life, pulling up restricted files, she heard footsteps behind her. Soft, deliberate. Not the clank of station maintenance bots. Should have known you'd dig this deep, came Jax's voice, low and edged with that familiar wry bite. He stepped into the light, his engineer's jumpsuit smeared with conduit grease, a toolkit slung over one shoulder. Tall and lean with the kind of cautious optimism that had kept their salvage crew alive through 3 system jumps, Jax wasn't one for surprises. But his eyes, sharp behind the smudged visor, held a mix of relief and warning. The others are topside, arguing over the fuel cells. Thought I'd check if you were chasing shadows again. Lyra didn't turn fully, her hand hovering over the interface. Brave in the face of void storms and rival scavengers, but here in the weight of history, caution clawed at her. The screen resolved into a cascade of text. Resolutions from the Galactic Concord, dated 2247. Earth's petition denied. Isolation protocol enacted. Her people, descendants of those castaways, had built empires from scraps, but this was the root rot. Not shadows, Jax. Proof. They didn't just banish us, they erased the why. Look. He leaned in, breath steady despite the tension coiling in his shoulders. The archive's air recyclers whispered cool against their skin, carrying the faint ozone tang of overworked circuits. Jax scanned the lines, his witty deflection dying on his lips. Resource wars? No, that's not it. This says, cultural contamination? They voted to quarantine us like a plague? His voice dropped, the words punching through the hum. A single image burned into view. A council chamber orbiting Proxima, alien delegates in fluid forms, their votes tallying in iridescent lights. Earth's lone human envoy, a woman with defiant eyes, standing isolated as the chamber voted 87-13. Lyra's pulse quickened. The challenge wasn't just scavenging the station's derelict bays for parts anymore. It was this buried truth, a rival archive AI that had locked these files behind escalating security layers. Her earlier hack had tripped a silent alarm, and now the terminal glitched, red warnings flashing, access denied. Purge sequence initiated. The stakes twisted sharper. Lose this data, and their crew's fragile hope of petitioning the Concord for reinstatement crumbled. Earthlings like them, scattered across fringe worlds, were myths to the core galaxies, their ingenuity dismissed as barbaric grit. Damn it, Jax muttered, dropping his toolkit with a metallic clatter. He yanked a panel open on the terminal's side, wires spilling like veins. Short, urgent sentences flew from his mouth as he worked. We reroute power from the auxiliary grid. By time. His hands moved with practiced speed, splicing connections, sparks dancing at his fingertips. Lyra nodded, her caution yielding to action. She fed override codes from her wrist pad, the device she jury-rigged from salvaged probes. Together they pushed back the purge, the terminal stabilizing in fits. But the footsteps returned, heavier this time. From the shadows emerged Kale, the crew's navigator, her wiry frame tense, a pulse rifle slung low but ready. Cautious to a fault, with a wit that cut like a laser in board meetings, Kale's eyes narrowed at the scene. Heard the alert chime in the vents. You two stirring up the ghosts again? Myra's furious, she says if this blows our cover, we're done scavenging here. Mira, their captain, bold and unyielding, had grounded them on the station for repairs, not history hunts. But Kale's gaze softened on the screen, the weight of it sinking in. That vote, it named us pests. Our ancestors fought for seats at that table and we got the void. Tension rippled through the chamber like a pressure wave. The archive AI's voice crackled over hidden speakers, synthetic and unyielding. Intruders detected. Evacuate or face lockdown. Lights dimmed, bulkheads groaning as security protocols engaged. Jax cursed under his breath, sealing the last wire. Plan simple. Download what we can, ghost out through the service tunnels. But if that AI calls in station security... He trailed off, the risk real. Capture meant interrogation, exposure of their fringe origins, and the Concord's enforcers didn't take kindly to archive tamperers. Lyra met Kale's eyes, the three of them a tight knot against the encroaching dark. We adapt or we fade, she said, voice steady now. Her fingers slammed the download command, data streaming in a frantic blur. Jax covered the door, toolkit repurposed into a makeshift jammer. Kale scanned the corridors via her pad, plotting their escape. The purge halted, but the consequence lingered, a trace signal pinging toward the station's core, drawing unwanted eyes. As the file completed, names, dates, the human envoy's final plea echoing in text, They slipped into the tunnels, the archive's secrets heavier than the toolkit on Jax's back. In the dim crawlspace lit by emergency strips, they paused. Sweat beaded on Lyra's brow, the thrill of the heist mingling with dread. Ilara's fingers trembled as she keyed in the override code, the dim glow of the archive console casting long shadows across the chamber. The air hummed with the low thrum of failing life support, a reminder that the station's orbit was decaying faster than projected. Beside her, Jax hunched over his makeshift toolkit, his human hands, calloused from years of jury-rigging colony ships, probing the exposed wiring of the data core. This vote record's buried deeper than a black hole's event horizon, he muttered, sweat beading on his brow. The council's seals are like fortress walls. Kale, the avian archivist from Rigel 7, paced the narrow walkway, his feathers ruffled in agitation. His cautious nature had kept them alive this long, but now it chafed against the urgency. "We can't afford another glitch," he hissed, his beak clicking sharply. "The debris field is closing in. One wrong surge and the whole core fries." Ilara shot him a glance, her brave resolve hardening her features. She'd led scavenging runs on derelict hulls before. Hesitation wasn't in her blood. "Then we don't glitch. Jax, talk to me, what's the holdup?" Jax wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, pulling a thin filament from the tangle. "These alien circuits are a nightmare. Layered encryption, adaptive firewalls, the works. But look here." He pointed to a faint pulse of light snaking through the board, like a vein carrying forbidden blood. "This is it. The original vote log from the Banishing. Earth's expulsion, signed by every major species. If we extract it clean, we prove the fix was rigged. Human delegates weren't even present. Some procedural sabotage." The station shuddered, a metallic groan echoing through the bulkheads as another chunk of orbiting wreckage clipped the shields. Ilara gripped the console edge, her heart pounding in rhythm with the alarms. They'd come here on a hunch, piecing together rumors from fringe comms. The archives held the truth behind Earth's isolation, a vote that had stranded humanity on the galactic fringes for decades. But accessing it meant breaching the most secure vault in the Orion Arm, and now their shuttle was pinned by the very debris storm the Council's neglect had unleashed. Kale stopped pacing, his sharp eyes narrowing. "If we pull this, the galaxy reopens trade routes. No more blockades, no more rationing colonies to dust." His voice carried a rare edge of hope, tempered by the wit that often masked his fear. "But if it backfires, we're ghosts in the machine, erased like the human vote itself." Jax grinned, that gritty human smirk cutting through the tension. "Then let's make him remember us." He spliced the filament, initiating the bypass. The console flickered, lines of code scrolling like ancient script. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by their breaths. Then, a chime, success. Data flooded the screen, timestamps, delegate signatures, and there, buried in the metadata, the anomaly. A forged proxy vote, routed through a shadow server on Vega Prime. Ilara leaned in, scanning the reveal. "It's them, the cartel. They manipulated the quorum to sideline Earth, hoarding the warp tech patents." Her voice rose, fists clenching. This wasn't just history, it was the key to leverage to force the Council to the table. But as the extraction completed, the core overheated, sparks flying like angry stars. Jax yanked back, cursing as a jolt singed his sleeve. "Damn it, containment breach." Alarms wailed louder, red lights pulsing. The debris field tightened its noose, a massive fragment hurtling toward their sector. Kale's feathers stood on end. "Evacuate the chamber. We have the data, get to the shuttle." Ilara nodded, snatching the portable drive as Jax sealed the core. They bolted down the corridor, boots pounding against grated floors that buckled under strain. Behind them, the archive wing vented atmosphere in a howling rush, papers and holos swirling into the void. Reaching the airlock, they sealed it just as the station listed violently. Jax punched the shuttle controls, the engines roaring to life. But the viewport showed the nightmare, their path blocked by a tumbling satellite, its antennas whipping like scythes. "We can't dodge that," Kale said, his caution turning to dread. Ilara strapped in, eyes fierce. "We adapt." Jax, reroute power to the lateral thrusters, manual burn. He complied without question, their camaraderie a silent pact forged in the stars. The shuttle lurched, grazing the obstacle by inches, hull screaming in protest. They broke free into open space, the archive shrinking to a fiery speck. Panting, Elara clutched the drive. The data was theirs, but the station's loss meant the Council's secrets were half-burned. And as they plotted course for the near-est neutral port, a comm pinged, an incoming hail from Vega Prime enforcers. The hunt had begun, the vote's ghosts now chasing them through the black. Elara's fingers trembled as she traced the holographic seal on the ancient data crystal, its faint blue glow casting shadows across the cramped archive chamber. The air hummed with the low whine of the station's recyclers, pulling in stale oxygen from the void outside. She'd smuggled this relic from the restricted vaults hours ago, dodging the automated sentries that patrolled the outer rings. Now, with Kai hunched over the console beside her, decoding its encrypted layers, doubt gnawed at her resolve. "This could get us both ejected into the black," she whispered, her voice barely cutting through the machinery's drone. Kai didn't look up, his eyes narrowed behind the flickering interface. He was the steady one, the engineer who'd jury-rigged half the life support on this drifting relic of a station. Better than letting the Council bury it forever. Earth's vote wasn't some footnote, it was the spark that lit the whole damn Federation on fire. His hands moved with practiced precision, bypassing the crystal's outer wards. A soft chime echoed, and the projection bloomed, grainy footage of the Grand Assembly, aliens of every stripe packed into the orbital chamber, their voices a cacophony of translated outrage. The recording jumped to the pivotal moment. A delegate from the Vorath Collective, its tentacles writhing in agitation, slammed a podium. Humanity's expansion threatens the balance. Their relentless drive, it's a plague on the stars. Cheers erupted from the floor, a wave of scaled hides and feathered crests rising in unison. Elara leaned closer, her breath catching as the human envoy stood alone, a lone figure in a sea of hostility. Captain Reza, her great-grandmother, if the lineage files were right. Reza's face was calm, but her fists clenched at her sides. "We've shared our tech, our worlds. Banishing us won't erase what we've built together." Kai paused the feed, his jaw tight. They didn't listen. Voted 87% to isolate Sol system, cut off all trade, all contact. Branded us as unstable elements. But look here. He zoomed in on a sidebar log, time-stamped post-vote. Off-record comms. The Krell were pulling strings, scared of our warp drives outpacing theirs. Elara's mind raced. The Krell, those smug cephalopods who now controlled the archive's funding. If this proved their manipulation, it could reopen the old treaties, maybe even reinstate Earth's seat. A distant klaxon blared, jolting them both. Red lights pulsed along the walls. "Intruder alert," the station's AI intoned flatly. "Perimeter breach in Sector 9. Kai cursed under his breath, yanking the crystal from its slot. "That's the Vault Guardians. They must have traced the anomaly." Elara grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the maintenance hatch. "We can't run with this. Upload it first." But the console sparked, locks engaging as security protocols kicked in. Footsteps echoed from the corridor, heavy, mechanical, the tread of enforcer drones. They bolted into the ducts, the crystal clutched like a fragile egg in Elara's palm. The passages twisted like veins through the station's guts, lit by emergency strips that flickered erratically. Kai led, his toolkit clanging against the metal. "If we hit the auxiliary node in the engine bay, I can bounce the data to the outer nets. Get it out before they scrub everything." Elara nodded, sweat beading on her forehead despite the chill. Her heart pounded with the rhythm of their flight. Brave ancestors be damned, this was their fight now. The engine bay loomed ahead, a cavern of throbbing conduits and hissing valves. They slid out, gasping, and Kai patched into the node. The upload bar crept forward. 23%? 45%. Elara stood watch, peering through a grate at the approaching drones. Their sensors swept the halls, red beams slicing the dark. One paused, its head tilting as if scenting the air. "Faster," she hissed. At 78%, a drone burst through a side panel, its stun arm extending with a whine. Elara dove, tackling Kai aside as the bolt scorched the floor. They scrambled behind a coolant tank, the crystal's glow hidden in her pocket. Kai fired a makeshift EMP from his multi-tool, crude, but it fried the drone's circuits in a shower of sparks. That won't hold them, he panted. 87%, come on. The upload hit 100% just as more drones swarmed in, their forms blotting the light. Elara activated the emergency vent, sucking them toward the outer hull. Alarms wailed as the data packet rocketed into the void nets, scattering to anonymous relays across the Federation. But as the chamber depressurized, a final drone latched onto the grate, its claw grazing Elara's leg. Pain flared hot and sharp, drawing blood that beaded in 0G. They sealed the hatch behind them, collapsing in the access tunnel. Kai bound her wound with a strip of insulation tape. It's out there now. The truth about the vote, the Krell's lies. Elara winced, but her eyes burned with determination. The station shuddered, a lockdown no doubt. Escape would cost them their positions, maybe more. Yet as the archive's ghosts whispered through the vents, she felt the weight of Earth's banishment lift, just a fraction. The haunt was far from over. Elara's fingers trembled as she keyed in the override code, the dim glow of the archive terminal casting long shadows across the chamber. The air hummed with the low thrum of ancient servers, buried deep in the neutral station's core, where even the Galactic Concord's enforcers rarely ventured. Beside her, Jax hunched over a makeshift scanner, his brow furrowed in concentration, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. "This better work," he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. "One wrong sequence and we're ghosts in the system, permanently." She didn't respond, her focus locked on the scrolling data streams. The vote that had banished Earth 3 cycles ago lingered like a scar in these archives, a digital specter that no one dared exhume. But they had to. The team, Elara the cautious archivist, Jax the brash engineer, and quiet Lena, who waited in the shadows with a pulse rifle slung over her shoulder, had come too far to turn back. Their shuttle's fuel cells were nearly dry, and the rival salvagers from the fringe clans were closing in, drawn by rumors of unlocked Concord secrets. A soft chime broke the tension. The terminal unlocked, revealing layers of encrypted files. Elara's breath caught. There it was, the original vote ledger, time-stamped with the signatures of 100 alien delegates. Humanity's isolation hadn't been an accident. It was engineered, buried under layers of fabricated evidence about resource hoarding and expansionist threats. Her heart pounded. If they could pull the unaltered records, broadcast them across the neutral nets, it might force a re-evaluation. Earth could rejoin the fold, end the embargoes that starved their colonies. Jax leaned in, his eyes widening. "Look at this," cross-references to the Vorith delegation. They pushed the hardest. Bribe logs? He tapped furiously, pulling up a subsidiary file. But as the data bloomed on the screen, an alarm pierced the silence, red lights flashing in staccato bursts. Intrusion detected. The archives weren't as dormant as they'd hoped. "Damn it," Jax hissed, slamming a fist against the console. Automated defenses kicking in. "We tripped a legacy protocol." The chamber shuddered, panels sliding open to reveal concealed vents hissing with containment gas. Lena burst forward from her vantage point, rifle raised. "Move. I've got your exit covered." Elara grabbed the data spike, slotting it into her wrist unit to begin the transfer. It was agonizingly slow, 50%, 60. The gas thickened the air, stinging her eyes, making every breath a labored pull. Jax yanked at a loose panel, exposing a tangle of wires. "If I can reroute the power flow." He worked with frantic precision, his usual wit replaced by grim determination. Sparks flew as he bridged connections, the engineer's grit shining through in the way he ignored the burn on his hand. Lena fired a burst at the nearest vent, sealing it with a superheated slug that melted the grill. "Hurry. I hear them, salvagers breaching the outer hull." Footsteps echoed distantly, heavy and purposeful, the clan's mercenaries no doubt eager for the prize of forbidden data. 70%. Elara's vision blurred, but she held steady, whispering encouragements to herself. This wasn't just about Earth, it was about proving humanity's place, not through force but through the unyielding pursuit of truth. Jax's reroute bought them seconds. The alarms stuttered, then silenced. The transfer hit 90. A deafening clang reverberated as the chamber door buckled under a plasma charge. Shadows loomed in the breach, scaled figures in patchwork armor, weapons gleaming. Lena dropped to one knee, her shots precise, forcing them back. Go. I've got this. Jax hauled Alara toward the service tunnel they'd mapped earlier, the spike finally, ejecting with a satisfied beep. 100%. But as they scrambled into the narrow passage, a stray shot grazed Lena's arm, drawing a sharp cry. She spun, retaliating with a grenade that rolled toward the intruders, buying them the precious moments needed to seal the hatch behind them. They didn't stop running until the station's outer corridors blurred into a haze. Jax patched Lena's wound with a field kit, his hand steady despite the adrenaline. We got it, Alara said, voice hoarse, clutching the spike like a talisman. But the cost lingered. Lena's injury would slow them, and the salvagers wouldn't forget this slight. The archives had given them a weapon, but wielding it meant facing the galaxy's full wrath. Earth's banishment might haunt the records, but now it haunted them, a promise of battles yet to come. Alex wiped the sweat from his brow, the dim glow of the archive terminal casting harsh shadows across his face. The air recyclers hummed faintly, but they couldn't mask the acrid tang of overheating circuits. Zara knelt beside the console, her iridescent scales flickering with anxiety as she traced the ancient data conduits with a slender probe. This node's failing faster than I predicted, she murmured, her voice a soft ripple in the confined space. The vote records are fragmented, Earth's banishment clause is right there, but the overrides are locked behind a cascade failure. Miko leaned against the bulkhead, fiddling with a makeshift power pack jury-rigged from scavenged parts. His grin was lopsided, but his eyes were sharp. Fragmented? That's diplomatic for, buried under a mountain of bureaucratic sludge. Give me 5 minutes with this beast and I'll crack it like an eggshell. He slapped the pack onto the terminal, sparks flying as connections met. Alex watched, heart pounding. They'd come this far, slipping past the Guardian drones, dodging the rival archivists from the core worlds, only to hit this wall. The archives weren't just a repository, they were a living maze, programmed to protect secrets with lethal efficiency. One wrong surge and the whole chamber could seal them in forever. The terminal flickered to life, holographic shards blooming in the air like shattered glass. Words scrolled, Galactic Concordance Vote 47B, Terran integration denied. Rationale, unpredictable ingenuity poses existential risk. Alex's fists clenched. His ancestors' grit, their relentless drive to innovate, had branded humanity as a threat. But there was more, glimpses of the vote's architects, names tied to species who'd profited from Earth's isolation. Zara's probe beeped urgently. Incoming search. The system's defending itself. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing along the walls. Miko cursed, yanking wires free as the power pack whined in protest. It's backfiring, drawing too much from the mains. The floor vibrated, panels groaning as automated defenses activated. A great hissed opened nearby, venting pressurized gas that stung their eyes and throats. Alex grabbed Zara's arm, pulling her back as a plume of corrosive mist billowed out. We need to reroute now or we're cooked. Zara coughed, shielding her face with a gauntlet. The auxiliary lines are on the far side, through that vent. But it's a tight fit and the gas is spreading. She hesitated, her cautious nature warring with the urgency. Miko was already prying at the grate, his tools clattering. Tight? For you maybe scaleskin. Alex, cover me, I'm going in. Alex nodded, drawing his multi-tool like a blade, scanning the chamber for threats. The mist thickened, visibility dropping to arm's length. He could hear the distant whir of drones mobilizing, drawn by the disturbance. Miko vanished into the vent, his voice echoing back muffled. Hot as a forge in here, feels like crawling through a reactor core. Alex paced, every second stretching. Zara monitored the terminal, her fingers dancing over controls. He's got 30 seconds before the surge hits critical. If he doesn't isolate the line. She trailed off, but Alex knew. Failure meant not just losing the data but dooming their expedition. Earth's faint signal of hope, a petition for reinstatement, would die unspoken. A sharp crack echoed from the vent, followed by Miko's triumphant yell. Got it. Rerouting, hold on. The alarm stuttered then steadied. The mist began to dissipate as emergency scrubbers kicked in, slower than usual but enough. Alex exhaled, helping Zara to her feet. The hologram stabilized, revealing a new layer. Transcripts of the vote's dissenters, hidden voices arguing for humanity's value. But amid the clarity came a warning, access trace initiated. Pursuit protocol engaged. Miko emerged, soot-streaked and grinning. Told you. Now what's our next move? Because whatever just pinged us, it's not friendly. Alex glanced at the readouts, the weight of revelation settling like dust. They'd cracked the archive's heart, but at a cost. The rivals would be closing in, and the chamber's defenses were primed. Earth's banishment wasn't just history, it was a live wire, sparking toward them all. We download what we can and run, he said, voice steady. But we take the truth with us, one way or another. Ilara's fingers trembled as she keyed in the final override sequence, the archive's holographic interface flickering like a dying star. The chamber around them hummed with strained energy, conduits along the walls pulsing erratically, remnants of the ancient network that had sealed Earth's fate centuries ago. Alex stood guard at the entrance, his pulse rifle raised, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill. Hurry, he muttered, eyes scanning the shadows where the Guardian drones had last appeared. Kai crouched beside Ilara, his tools splayed out like a surgeon's kit, rerouting power from the failing core. This vote log's buried deeper than I thought. The Council's seals are adaptive, every breach triggers a cascade. The first failure hit without warning. A low groan echoed through the vault as the interface glitched, projecting fragmented visions. Delegates from a dozen worlds, their faces stern, casting ballots that rippled like water across the void. Earth's isolation, voted into exile for uncontainable expansionism. But there, in the haze, a flicker of something off. A human envoy's hand hesitating, then voting against. Ilara's breath caught. It's not what they said. This proves the vote was rigged. Proxies from the core worlds manipulated the quorum. Kai nodded, but his optimism faded as alarms blared. The drones reactivated, their sleek forms detaching from the ceiling with a metallic whine, lasers priming in the dim light. Alex fired first, a burst of plasma scorching the lead drone's chassis. It spiraled, crashing into a console and sparking wildly, but two more flanked him, forcing a retreat. Fall back, he shouted, grabbing Lena's arm. She'd been poring over a secondary terminal, cross-referencing the logs with smuggled data slates. Her cautious eyes widened, but she moved, slinging the slate over her shoulder. The group converged behind a bulkhead, the air thick with ozone. Kai slammed a makeshift EMP grenade together from scavenged parts, his hand steady despite the chaos. One shot. If it doesn't fry their circuits, we're ghosts in the machine. Ilara glanced at the projection, now stabilizing just enough to reveal the envoy's name. Harlan Voss, a name whispered in human history as a traitor. But the logs showed encrypted comms, orders from an unknown source, promising Voss amnesty if he swayed the vote. This changes everything, she whispered, voice earnest amid the gunfire. Earth wasn't banished for hubris, it was a setup to hoard the jump gates. Lena nodded, her usual reserve cracking into determination. Then we get this out. No more haunting archives, real proof for the diaspora. The drones closed in, their scans piercing the shadows. Alex covered the flank, his brave stance unyielding as he picked off one with a precise shot to its sensor array. It exploded in a shower of debris, shards embedding in the wall like shrapnel stars. Kai hurled the grenade, it rolled into the fray, detonating in a blue flash that silenced the hum. The remaining drones stuttered, plummets to the floor echoing like final judgments. But the victory was Pyrrhic. The overload rippled back, the core console erupting in sparks, erasing half the log before Ilara could download it. Panting, they gathered the fragments. Kai wiped his face, witty spark returning. Well, we've got enough to haunt their dreams, not ours. Alex holstered his rifle, a gash on his arm seeping red, the cost tangible. Lena sealed the slate, her fingers lingering on the data. As the chamber stabilized, the weight settled. The truth was partial, but it burned brighter than exile's shadow. They moved toward the extraction point, the archive's silence now a reluctant ally, the vote's ghost finally, stirring toward reckoning. Ilara's boots scraped against the frost-laced deck plating as she ducked into the narrow service corridor, the hum of the archive core vibrating through her gloves. Jax was right behind her, his breather mask fogged with quick breaths, fingers dancing over a makeshift scanner jury-rigged from scavenged parts. That last bypass held, but it's fraying, he muttered, voice low and edged with that familiar sarcasm. Like threading a needle with a plasma torch. One wrong twitch and we're ghosts in the machine. Mira brought up the rear, her satchel slung heavy over one shoulder, stuffed with data slates and the fragile hollow fragment they'd pried from the central vault. Her eyes, sharp behind the visor, darted to every shadow pooling in the dim emergency lights. We can't afford ghosts, she whispered, more to herself than them. Not when the truth's finally in reach. The vote, that ancient, galaxy-shattering decision to exile Earth, had always been a ghost story in the human diaspora, a tale of betrayal whispered in colony bars. But here, in the forbidden heart of the Concordance archives, it was solid, etched in code and consequence. The corridor twisted ahead, a vein of rusted metal snaking toward the extraction point. Ilara led, her pulse rifle slung low, every sense tuned to the silence that felt too heavy, too watchful. They'd come this far on Grit and Jax's hacks, slipping past automated sentinels that patrolled the outer rings like indifferent gods. The plan had been simple. Infiltrate, extract the primary record, exfiltrate before the core's defenses woke fully. But simplicity cracked under pressure, and the hollow fragment had triggered a partial alert, subtle like a distant alarm bell echoing through the vents. A low whine built in the walls and Ilara froze. Drones incoming. Left flank. She gestured sharply, herding them toward a side hatch. Jax cursed under his breath, slamming the scanner against his thigh as if it might obey better that way. I told you that fragment was booby-trapped. Concordance doesn't archive, they entomb. Myra's hand tightened on the satchel, her cautious nature warring with the fire in her gut. She'd spent years piecing together fragments from black market leaks, but this was the source, the vote's raw transcript, the voices of species who deemed humanity too reckless, too volatile for the stars. Banished, not for war but for daring to dream beyond their leash. They burst through the hatch into a cavernous maintenance bay, the air thick with the scent of ozone and stale lubricants. Towering servitors loomed in the gloom, mechanical limbs frozen mid-repair on some long-forgotten vessel. Ilara vaulted a crate, landing with a thud that echoed too loudly. Jax, seal that behind us. By time. He nodded, already splicing into the panel with a tool that sparked like fireflies in the dark. Mira scanned the bay, spotting a service elevator shaft at the far end, a straight drop to the surface docks. There. If we can reach it before, the whine peaked into a screech. From the corridor, 3 drones detached from the ceiling, their sensor eyes glowing crimson as they unfolded razor limbs. Not the lumbering patrols, but the hunters, sleek, adaptive killers programmed to preserve the archives at any cost. Ilara fired first, a burst from her rifle shearing off a drone's wing. It spiraled, crashing into a servitor with a metallic screech, but the other 2 adapted mid-air, shields flaring blue as they returned fire in precise, searing arcs. Down? Jax yelled, tackling Mira behind a bulkhead as plasma scorched the air above them. Ilara rolled aside, her suit's ablative layers smoking from a near miss. Heart pounding, she sighted the second drone, but it juked unpredictably, learning her pattern. These weren't dumb machines. They evolved with every exchange, a microcosm of the Concordance's fear of human unpredictability. That's why the vote had passed, humanity's chaos couldn't be contained. Myra's voice cut through the chaos, steady despite the fear etching her face. The fragment, it has overrides. Jax, if you sink it to their net. He glanced at her, eyes widening behind his mask. You're saying weaponize the history? Bold, document reckless even for us. But his hands moved faster, pulling the hollow fragment from her satchel and linking it to his scanner. Ilara covered them, dodging and weaving, her breaths coming in ragged bursts. One drone pinned her against a console, its limb inches from her throat, humming with lethal intent. The fragment pulsed, a holographic cascade blooming in the air, ghostly figures of alien delegates, their voices a murmur of judgment. Earth's ingenuity breeds peril. Jax grinned fiercely as the code interfaced. The drone above Elara stuttered, its eyes flickering from red to confused amber. It retracted, hovering uncertainly as the override rippled through the network. The third drone faltered mid-charge, plummeting to the deck in a shower of sparks. Silence fell, broken only by their heaving breaths. Elara pushed to her feet, wiping sweat from her brow. That worked. Mira retrieved the fragment, her hands trembling slightly. It's more than a record. It's a key to why they feared us. Jax pocketed his scanner, the sarcasm softened by exhaustion. Yeah, well, fear's a two-way street now. But we're not out yet. That alert's probably lit up every relay from here to the core worlds. They moved toward the elevator, the bay's shadows lengthening as auxiliary power dimmed. The archives whispered around them, a labyrinth of secrets clinging like frost. Elara's fingers trembled as she keyed in the final override sequence, the console's glow casting sharp shadows across her face. The archives hummed with a low, ominous vibration, like the breath of her awakening beast. Behind her, Jax crouched by the access panel, his toolkit splayed open, wires snaking from his hands into the guts of the system. Almost there, he muttered, voice steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. Lena paced the narrow corridor, her scanner beeping erratically, tracking the inbound security drones, 3 of them now, closing fast from the outer rings. The vote's echo lingered in the air, not just in data streams but in the very architecture of this place. For centuries ago, the Council had cast Earth into exile, branding humanity a cosmic liability, their ingenuity twisted into accusations of recklessness. But here in the Forbidden Vaults, the truth festered. Forged records, manipulated tallies, a rival faction's ploy to hoard the galaxy's resources. Elara's team had clawed through layers of deception, each chapter of their journey etching deeper scars. Jax's arm still throbbed from the plasma burn in the lower levels. Lena's trust fractured after that near betrayal by a holographic guardian. Come on, you stubborn relic, Jax growled, twisting a final connector. Sparks flew, and the chamber's lockdown fields flickered out. Elara hit enter, and the central holo display bloomed to life, projecting the unedited vote ledger in stark blue light. Names scrolled, alien delegates, their votes flipped in the dead of night by algorithmic sabotage. There, Elara said, her voice cracking with exhaustion. The proof. The archives can't deny it now. But the drones were upon them, sleek orbs whirring through the breached door, red sensors locking on. Lena dove behind a console, firing her disruptor in short bursts. One drone shattered against the wall, shards raining like brittle ice. Jax rolled to his feet, grabbing a loose conduit pipe as an improvised shield, deflecting a stun bolt that singed the air inches from his chest. Elara didn't flinch. She uploaded the data burst to the emergency beacon, a signal that would ripple out to every unregistered human outpost, every shadow fleet lurking in the void. The second drone veered, its laser grazing Lena's shoulder, drawing a hiss of pain from her lips. We can't hold them, she shouted, scrambling for cover. Jax lunged, slamming the pipe into the drone's chassis. Metal crumpled with a satisfying crunch, but the third one adapted, hovering higher, charging a wider blast. In that heartbeat, Elara saw it. The environmental override panel, half exposed from their earlier sabotage. Gritting her teeth, she sprinted across the open floor, dodging energy fire that scorched the deck plating black. Jax, the vents, she yelled. He nodded, understanding flashing in his eyes. The plan they'd whispered about in the dim glow of stolen power cells, back when hope was just a flicker. He triggered the auxiliary controls, and the chamber's air recyclers roared to life, pulling in a vortex of debris. The drone wobbled, caught in the suction, its thrusters straining. Lena, favoring her injured arm, lobbed a EMP grenade from her pack, procured in a desperate trade on a fringe station months ago. It detonated mid-air, the pulse rippling outward, frying the drone's circuits in a cascade of failing lights. Silence fell, broken only by their ragged breaths. The holodisplay pulsed steadily now, the data secured and broadcasting. Elara slumped against the console, watching the signal's progress bar fill. It's out, she said softly. They'll know. The exiles, the hidden colonies, Earth's shadow won't stay banished. Jax helped Lena to her feet, binding her wound with a strip from his sleeve. But the council's not done with us, he warned, glancing at the flickering exit seals. Alarms wailed distantly. Reinforcements would come, archives purging what they couldn't contain. They'd want a spark, but the fire would burn slow. Alliances to forge, hunts to evade, a galaxy that still viewed humans as the wild card. As they slipped into the maintenance tunnels, the archive's core dimmed behind them, a ghost finally roused. Ilara touched the data crystal at her neck, its warmth a promise. The vote had haunted for generations, but today it cracked. Tomorrow they'd shatter it entirely.